Yeah.
Sure. Can
Yeah,
you
I
see
can. Yeah,
PPT
I can
file?
see it perfectly. Yeah, going to the
Okay.
next slide. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you
next
so
slide.
much. I will stop
Okay.
sharing.
Okay. Yeah. That's great that so many of you would like to stay with us for Professor Cai's talk. So welcome back again. Again, my name is Zhang Qi from Dublin City University. Thank you for joining us. If you just came into the Zoom room or for staying with us for the third talk of Frontiers of Teaching and Learning Chinese. So please allow me to introduce Professor Dr Wei from the School of Languages, Linguistics, Literatures, and Cultures at the University of Calgary. Professor Cai is the director of the Language Research Center and president of the Chinese Language Teaching and Research Association. Her research interests include second language listening and acquisition. Recently, she published a book with Routledge on the topic of teaching and researching Chinese second language listening. However, today I believe she will share with us her latest findings regarding the principles for leveraging ChatGPT in Chinese language learning and teaching. So now, without further ado, I will pass the microphone to Professor Cai Wei. Cai 老师。
Thank you so much, Dr. Zhang, for your kind introduction, for organizing this event. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the use of ChatGPT in Chinese language learning and teaching. Now, please allow me to share screen. Okay. Can you see my PPT file?
Yes. Yes,
Oh,
it works.
okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. So today I'm going to talk about the principled application of ChatGPT in Chinese language learning and teaching. I will talk about 4 issues. The first one is characteristics of learner-ChatGPT interactions. The second one is language acquisition conditions provided by ChatGPT. The third one is principles for using ChatGPT. If I have time, I will talk about the concerns regarding its potential to replace teachers. I know this arouses some concerns among teachers. There's a concern whether ChatGPT would likely to replace teachers. So if I have time, I will briefly talk about this issue as well. Current discussions on the use of ChatGPT in language learning and teaching focus on the tasks that ChatGPT can perform. So these tasks include producing texts. We all know that ChatGPT can produce texts with specified topics, functions, styles, difficulty levels, and selected words and sentence patterns. ChatGPT can provide interaction and feedback. This is the focus of today's talk, so I'm going to talk about this later. ChatGPT can provide information such as language rules, cultural information, sentence patterns, and festivals. For instance, if we ask this question, what are the rules of using ba sentences? ChatGPT will provide meaning, the formula in using ba sentences, and sample sentences, and specific rules for using ba sentences. So, and ChatGPT can also produce supplementary materials, such as lesson plans, word lists, and flashcards. Please allow me to, I can't see the bottom part of my slide. Okay, that's a problem. Let me adjust the, okay, I should be fine now. Okay, ChatGPT can create tests and activities. It can create tests in different formats. For instance, closed test, multiple choice tests, true or false tests. In terms of activities ChatGPT can produce, it can produce role plays, group discussions, and so on. ChatGPT can also provide help functions. If we ask ChatGPT to provide translation from target language to one's native language, ChatGPT can do it. It can also give pinyin. Another function we often talk about is use ChatGPT to grade assignments. ChatGPT can produce descriptive evaluations about assignments. So these are the tasks we are talking about now. I would think that the tasks that ChatGPT can perform in Chinese language learning and teaching are like its external behaviors. In order to use ChatGPT to facilitate language learning and teaching, we need to understand its inner essence, including characteristics of the communication between learners and ChatGPT, and language acquisition conditions provided by ChatGPT. And only after we understand its inner essence, we know how to collaborate with ChatGPT. That is the principles for using ChatGPT. So it's like getting to know ChatGPT is like knowing a real person. So at the first stage, we observe this person's external behaviors. For instance, this person is good at playing piano. This person is good at cooking and playing table tennis. To truly be friend with this person, we must know this person's inner qualities, like whether this is a kind of person and this person's personality. So after we know its inner qualities, we will know whether we want to make friend with this person, and we will know how to handle our relationship. So external behaviors, inner essence, collaboration principles is my research journey. It's also my today's presentation. So I just talked about the tasks that ChatGPT can perform. Is ChatGPT's external behaviors. Now I'm going to talk about its inner essence. I will first talk about characteristics of communication between learners and ChatGPT. This slide shows major characteristics of communication between learners and ChatGPT. It can provide input, interaction, and output. This is a focus for today's discussion, so I will talk about later. And ChatGPT can display certain interpersonal communication characteristics. By interpersonal, I mean human and human communication. And one unique feature of ChatGPT is the interaction is done through writing. Of course, we can do interaction through voice-based format, but interaction through writing is still a noticeable feature of ChatGPT and learner interaction. And learners also display some affective characteristics when they communicate with ChatGPT. The relationship between learners and ChatGPT is very unique. So ChatGPT can serve as a language guide or language coach or language teacher for learners. On the other hand, learners play a directing role with ChatGPT by use of prompts. Prompts are like a conductor's baton. So the relationship is pretty interesting. Now I'm going to talk about the interpersonal communication characteristics. Okay, so the top part of this slide has a question. The question is, when learners communicate with ChatGPT, will they follow interpersonal social principles and display certain characteristics of interpersonal communication? We can answer this question by using two pieces of evidence. The first evidence is our interaction experience with ChatGPT. We perhaps realize that when we interact with ChatGPT, we often use polite language. Let me give you an example. When we ask ChatGPT to show an example, we often use, can you give me an example, which is an interrogative request form. We don't use, or we don't really use this imperative command, like give me an example. So this shows that we follow some interpersonal social principles and show some characteristics of interpersonal communication. The second piece of evidence is research on human-machine interaction. Let me show you more interesting findings about human-machine interaction. Here, I'm going to talk about computers are social actors paradigm. This paradigm shows some interesting findings. So when interacting with computers, people will apply social rules, unconsciously responding with social scripts from interpersonal communication. People often overuse social characterizations to computers, such as race and gender. The following pieces of observation are very, very interesting. For instance, computers with male voices are perceived as more friendly than those with female voices. This is very interesting. I would think. So compliments from computers with male voices are more attention-grabbing than those from computers with female voices, because we overuse conventional social behaviors when we interact with computers, such as politeness. So when a computer helps someone, this person feel the need to give back. So these are interesting observations made by this CASA paradigm. In recent year, a new version of CASA has been proposed. Based on this new version, through more frequent and sustained interactions, people might apply specific schemas when interacting with media agents, not necessarily following interpersonal social scripts. So based on this evidence, our experiences interacting with ChatGPT and research on human-machine interaction, we can predict that when learners interact with ChatGPT, they will follow certain social norms and assume particular social cultural roles. So their social cultural competence, beliefs, and values will unconsciously influence their interaction with ChatGPT. So, but on the other hand, they will also exhibit unique characteristics, such as a reduction in the use of polite language when they interact with ChatGPT more frequently, and when they become more aware that they are interacting with a machine. So ChatGPT does not possess emotional capabilities. We can preclude learners from showing emotional inclinations towards ChatGPT. So this is another characteristic of communication between learners and ChatGPT. As I mentioned earlier, one noticeable feature between learner and ChatGPT interaction is the written mode. It has some impact on the learning process and learning outcomes. For instance, written information is permanent. So this could reduce the demand on learners' working memory, give learners more time and cognitive resources to focus on the main meaning and the form of language input. This also increase opportunities for learners to clarify meanings and produce modified output. On the other hand, the written mode also make the communication lack information provided by suprasegmental features. So we don't have information about intonation, and we don't have paralinguistic features like gestures, facial expressions. This will also impact the communication between learners and ChatGPT. On the other hand, this kind of written mode will influence interaction patterns and topics. There is a study that shows computer-mediated interaction provide learners with more time to encode and decode information, and interactors tend to express misunderstandings in a clearer way compared with face-to-face interactions. So we can see that communication in the written mode will affect how language is learned, is used. So this is another feature between for the communication between learners and ChatGPT. Now I'm going to talk about the affection factors. Communication with ChatGPT might lower anxiety levels on the part of the learners. This is because there's no time pressure, and ChatGPT is a machine. So learners do not have the pressure to maintain their social images. So it's very unlike communication with a real person, right? And communicating with a machine does not have any consequence. So this will lower their anxiety level. And there is an empirical study showing that computer-mediated synchronous communication can reduce anxiety compared with face-to-face discussions. This is another piece of evidence showing that learners might have lower anxiety level when they communicate with ChatGPT. But there could be a negative impact on their affection. Learners' interest might decrease with over time when they communicate with ChatGPT. This is because ChatGPT does not have emotional characteristics. It doesn't have humanistic sentiment. So initially, learners may feel surprised or even grateful for the functions that ChatGPT can produce. But with longer use, they might feel coldness and boredom when they communicate with ChatGPT. Fryer et al. Conducted a study in 2017. They compared practicing with robots to practicing with peers. After 3 weeks, they found that the interest of students practicing with robots decreased, but the interest of those practicing with peers, humans, remained unchanged. So this is evidence showing that there could be decreasing interest on the part of learners. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the second major issue for today. That is the language acquisition conditions provided by ChatGPT. I analyze the conditions using the interaction approach. This approach involves 4 hypotheses or even more, such as the comprehensible input hypothesis, the interaction hypothesis, the noticing hypothesis, the comprehensible output hypothesis. And this interaction approach also involves some major concepts in second language acquisition, including input, interaction, feedback, noticing, and output. In the next part, I'm going to talk about these concepts. I will first show how theories and research indicate each of the concepts, and then I will talk about conditions created by ChatGPT in light of these theories and research. First, I'm going to talk about input. We understand that a large amount of comprehensible input is crucial for language acquisition. How can we get comprehensible input? There are different ways for getting comprehensible input. For instance, we can adjust the difficulty or complexity level of the text. Picker et al. In 1987 proposed that we can change complexity of the text. For instance, we can reduce the number of S nodes in T units, and we can increase the number of words expressing information, and we can provide redundant information. For instance, we can repeat content words. Alice proposed that we can use short sentences. We can reduce proposition content. We can elaborate explanations, and etc. So by means of these ways, we can adjust the difficulty and complexity of the text so we can get comprehensible input. How about the conditions created by ChatGPT in light of these theories and research? And here is my finding. By providing ChatGPT with appropriate prompts and examples, we can achieve similar adjustments in text difficulty and complexity. I will show you examples I will show you examples of interacting with ChatGPT. So ChatGPT can also provide word annotations, including translation and pinyin. Learners can also switch between English or their target language and Chinese language. They can review their chat history with ChatGPT. These features can also help in producing comprehensible input. Now I'm going to give you an example showing how we can use short sentences to produce the comprehensible input. So I give ChatGPT a prompt intended to produce short sentences. So I asked ChatGPT to rewrite the content using short sentences. I mentioned that please rewrite the sentences using shorter sentences so that I can understand this part better. And ChatGPT produced the shorter sentences. So you can notice that the original sentence is 你继续前行会看到一家大超市在你的前方，别忘了，如果你见到一家银行在你的后边，那就说明你已经错过了那个大超市。So ChatGPT produces a shorter sentence, and this is the sentence ChatGPT produces. 你向前走，你会看到超市在前面，看到银行在后面，说明你错过了超市。So we can notice that after we input the prompt, rewrite the content using shorter sentences. ChatGPT did offer a short sentence expressing similar content. Okay, so this is just one example showing that and ChatGPT can help learners get comprehensible input. Now I'm going to talk about the feedback. We all know that feedback is very important for second language acquisition. For instance, feedback can direct learners' attention to language forms, and it can highlight issues in learners' interlanguage. There are different types of feedback. We often talk about explicit feedback, like explicit correction. For instance, we can point out the error in students' output, saying, hey, you made a mistake, and the correct way should be this. And we can also provide meta-linguistic explanations. We also have implicit feedback, like recast. The problem with recast is that learners might not notice error in their speech or the correct language forms used by the speaker. In terms of explicit negative feedback, it can facilitate language learning or facilitate learning of certain second languages, sentence structures, but it might cause frustration and stress for learners during interpersonal communication. For instance, if we explicitly point the error in learner's error in a classroom environment, and the learner might feel embarrassed or lose face. So a lot of time we need to be very careful when we use negative feedback in a social setting. But let's see the conditions created by ChatGPT. So by using the appropriate prompts, ChatGPT can generate corresponding feedback. I will provide an example later. And in the ChatGPT environment, explicit negative feedback will not make learners feel stressed or embarrassed. So its use should be increased. And teachers can introduce these different types of feedback to learners and guide them to consciously obtain the desired feedback based on their own characteristics and different learning situations. Now let me give you an example. So I was asking ChatGPT to use explicit correction, a type of explicit feedback to correct my error. So I give this is a prompt. Wait, if I make mistakes, please tell me I'm wrong and then correct me. And I on purpose produced a wrong sentence, which is 我比小英很喜欢汉语. So let's see feedback. Let's see the feedback provided by ChatGPT. ChatGPT mentioned 你的句子几乎是正确的，但在比较的句子中，我们需要使用更而不是很，所以应该说我比小英更喜欢汉语。OK， 这句话的意思是相比于小英，你更喜欢汉语，继续努力。So we can find that if we ask ChatGPT to provide explicit correction feedback, ChatGPT can do it. So let's see an example of recast. So now I give ChatGPT a different prompt, which is use recast to correct my errors. So I produced a wrong sentence. The sentence is 我们昨天打球了1个小时. Let's see ChatGPT's feedback. 听起来你们过得很愉快。我们昨天打了1个小时的球。你们喜欢打什么类型的球类运动呢？篮球、排球还是足球 ？We can notice that ChatGPT rewrite the sentence using the correct form, but keep the meaning. So this is a recast. So you can see that we can realize recast if we give ChatGPT proper proper prompts. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about another influential concept in second language acquisition, which is noticing. So we have this noticing hypothesis. To make it simple, noticing hypothesis indicate that learners need to pay attention to language forms in order to achieve acquisition. So methods to enhance learners' attention include input enhancement techniques. We can use flooding, that is extensive use of a language feature. For instance, I taught my students ba sentence, and I can use flooding to help them practice ba sentence. I give them a short paragraph, and this short paragraph is full of ba sentences. So this is flooding. That is extensive use of particular language feature. We can also use highlighting. For instance, we can bold or highlight or enlarge the font, okay, of the sentences. So we are try to highlighting the language feature. I will show you examples later. Let's take a look at the conditions created by ChatGPT. Given the appropriate prompts, ChatGPT can generate a text that extensively use a certain word or sentence structure. It can also bold the target word or target sentence structures. So teacher can use these features to create teacher materials. We should also inform learners about these methods, allowing them to give corresponding instructions to ChatGPT for implementation. Let's see some examples. And this example shows flooding and input enhancement. So I give ChatGPT this prompt. Write a 10-sentence Chinese paragraph showing how Xiaoli arranged her living room using ba sentences, bold ba sentences. So you can see this is a very short paragraph. I think it includes 8. I didn't count. But anyway, it includes many ba sentences, and also ba sentences are bold. So it enhances learners' attention to ba sentences. So this is an example to use ChatGPT for flooding and input enhancement features. Another thing about notice I'd like to talk about is input processing theory. That is, learners primarily focus on the semantic information in the input. They will need supplementary practices that help draw their attention to specific aspects within the input, such as exercises, targeting a particular grammar point. We know that generally speaking, exercises are form focused, right? So let's take a look at the conditions created by ChatGPT. So ChatGPT can generate exercises targeting a specific grammar point. For instance, if we ask ChatGPT to produce exercises for ba sentences, ChatGPT can do it. So after learners complete the tasks, we understand that normally tasks are meaning focused, right? So after learners complete the meaning focused tasks, we can ask ChatGPT to produce exercises that are form focused to enhance their attention to the language structure. Oh, this is interaction. You can see that this is the content is very, very intensive. So I first talk about the significance of interaction for language acquisition. So interaction plays a very important role in language acquisition. And for instance, learners can negotiate meanings when they interact with another person, and negotiation can also help produce comprehensible input. And the scholars often talk about the 3 types of interactive modifications to promote language understanding. These 3 types of interactive modifications include confirmation checks, comprehension checks, and clarification requests. These are the 3 major types of interactive modifications. If you read the literature on interaction, you will find that there are many empirical studies talking about these 3 types of modification. Okay, so by interaction, learners can receive feedback. They can also notice the differences between their own output and the speaker's utterances. So the significance of interaction is highlighted in the literature. It's very important for language acquisition. So let's take a look at the conditions created by ChatGPT in light of the theories and the research. We understand that a noticeable feature of communication with ChatGPT is a written form. So learners don't have pressure of fleeting information, and they don't worry about the other person is waiting for their response. So this will allow them to focus on both the meaning and form of the language. They are able to negotiate both meaning and forms. So as a language teacher, we should remind the students to pay attention to language forms. They can compare the similarities and differences between their own output and ChatGPT's. And they can closely observe ChatGPT's language use. In terms of these three types of modifications, we should highlight that it should be bidirectional. Bidirectional, I means that learners should instruct ChatGPT to use these strategies. They can explicitly tell ChatGPT to use these strategies in their proper words and provide definition and examples. For instance, when learners communicate with ChatGPT, they can tell ChatGPT use the confirmation checks, and you can give ChatGPT definition of confirmation checks. They can also provide an example of confirmation checks. So by means of this, ChatGPT can use these modification strategies. On the other hand, learners should also proactively use this kind of strategies to enhance their understanding. So this is interaction, and this slide is very crowded, and the information is very intense. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about output. So it's very apparent that ChatGPT provides learners with conditions for extensive language output. So learners can rephrase their initial statements based on feedback. This will result in modified output. They can consciously think about the meanings they cannot express due to their linguistic limitations and linguistic hypotheses that led to incorrect outputs. So they can internalize linguistic knowledge by reflecting on the outputs. And all these align with the significance output emphasized in the output hypothesis proposed by Swan. Swan is a Canadian scholar. I think you should know. You know it. I would think that she's a Canadian scholar from the University of Toronto. Okay, so I talked about the conditions that ChatGPT provides for language acquisition. Now I'm going to talk about a third major issue for today's presentation, which is principles for language learning with ChatGPT. Only after we understand the features of communication between ChatGPT and learners and the conditions that ChatGPT produces for language acquisition can we find the principles for language learning with ChatGPT. So this diagram shows the principles for language learning with ChatGPT. And let's take a look at the top part. And A1, this principle refer obtaining comprehensible input. And as you can see that ChatGPT can produce comprehensible input. And A2 is learners need to negotiate the meaning and forms when they communicate with ChatGPT. And they should receive feedback, especially explicit negative feedback. And A1, A2, and A3 are proposed based on interaction approach, like what I presented earlier. And B1 and B2 are about focusing on meaning and forms, because there is a research showing that focusing on meaning and the form together will enhance language learning. So we should give learners opportunities for focus on form, which is meaning focused. Learners should also have opportunities for FONFS. This is form focused learning. Okay. So C1, C2, and C3 are proposed based on characteristics of communication between learners and ChatGPT, like the second issue I talked about. So we should enhance the ability to transfer skills from human-machine interaction to interpersonal exchange. So we understand, based on my earlier presentation, we understand that communication between learners and ChatGPT display some interpersonal characteristics, but it also have its own unique features. So we should enhance their ability to transfer skills acquired from ChatGPT and learner interaction to human-human interaction. And we should aim at increasing learner motivation. And remember, I show you some empirical studies which indicate that learner-machine interaction might cause decreasing interest in language learning. So we should make efforts to enhance learners' motivation. And we should improve the ability to generate effective prompt words. Perhaps I don't have time to talk about the prompts, but I have some information about prompts. But anyway, so C1, C2, and C3 are proposed based on characteristics of communication between learners and ChatGPT. And D1 and D2 about strategies. We understand that strategies play a very important role in language acquisition. So enhance learners' abilities to understand, to use strategies and understand strategy is very important. So we should, D1, this principle is using cognitive and social emotional strategies, social affective strategies. We normally say that, right? We can also employ metacognitive planning, monitoring, evaluating, and reflecting on the learning process and outcomes. So this is a principle. These are the principles for learning, language learning with ChatGPT. So this is based on what I talked about, the features about ChatGPT learner interaction and also conditions created by ChatGPT. Okay, this is a prompt. So I still have a little bit of time, so I quickly talk about the prompts. Prompts is very, very important in order to achieve the intended learning outcomes. So there is a book. Also, there are lots of discussions about what prompt words are effective. So some people propose that we should introduce the problem in the prompt. We should assign roles to ChatGPT. We should have clear information in the prompts, and we should provide parameters for the expected answer, like the length and the form of the answer. I should say that these strategies are effective to get effective prompts. I think that prompts containing definitions, examples, and keywords will help ChatGPT generate the desired results. So according to the interaction approach, repetition during meaning negotiation is useful for learners. So repeat information. So if we want ChatGPT to produce repetition, the keyword repeat should be included in the prompt. So keywords, definition, examples will help produce effective prompts. And please also note that using different languages for input prompts can also influence the output. So if you use Chinese or English to give the prompt, the result could be different. So this is a prompt. Now I still have some time, so I'd like to talk about the concern that ChatGPT might replace teachers. So if we look at the capabilities and the power from a developmental perspective, this question deserves reflection. Okay, so this is not unreasonable worry, and ChatGPT or other AI tools has great opportunities, and the power is excellent. So please also note that the development of AI products is still advancing at an astonishing rate. And ChatGPT is still in its early stages. I would think it's still in the infancy stage. And it will become more smart. It will become smarter, more intelligent. And also please note that when ChatGPT is combined with other technologies, its power will be considerably enhanced. For instance, if we use ChatGPT, Midjourney, we know that Midjourney is an AI tool generating pictures. And if we use plugin that generate voice, so this will bring us closer to replicating the effect of a teacher's lesson. So combining with other AI tools will make ChatGPT very powerful as well. So this question deserves our attention. But on the other hand, ChatGPT lacks emotion and humanistic sensibilities that teachers possess. So I would think that ChatGPT cannot replace the entire teaching profession. Okay, I believe so. The teaching profession will be there. But teachers using AI will surpass and gradually replace those not using AI. And ChatGPT can perform some tasks traditionally done by teachers, possibly leading to a reduced overall demand for teachers. So this is what I think. And also the use of ChatGPT requires teachers to have stronger and more diverse abilities, such as a deeper familiarity with the mechanism of language learning and enhance the critical thinking skills. I would think that using ChatGPT randomly is not useful. For instance, if we ask ChatGPT, produce a poem, produce a song, produce lyrics. So random use of ChatGPT will not be effective for language learning. So we need to understand the language learning mechanism and use ChatGPT aligning with these language learning mechanisms will produce favorable results. So this is so the path for researching ChatGPT, and this is also my research journey, as I mentioned, is we first study its external behaviors. That is, what task can ChatGPT produce? And this is external behaviors. I think in earlier months this year, a lot of discussions focus on ChatGPT's external behaviors. Now we should understand its inner essence. And I just give you two examples. I'm not saying that inner essence only includes these two aspects. It will include other aspects as well. So we should understand the characteristic of the communication between learners and ChatGPT and language acquisition conditions provided by ChatGPT. And then we think about the principles for using ChatGPT. So the principles I show in this slide is not exhaustive list of the principles. As we understand better the learning with ChatGPT, we will refine these principles. So to sum up today's presentation, I like to indicate that after understanding the surface level tasks that ChatGPT can perform, we should think about the conditions it has actually created for language acquisition and subsequently consider the principles we should use for using ChatGPT. And the second point is very, very important. We can't use ChatGPT in isolation, okay? So when we use ChatGPT, we should apply it within the whole learning and teaching environment. Okay, so this is because the impact of ChatGPT on language learning and teaching is constrained by different factors, and considering ChatGPT in isolation makes it difficult to take advantage of its full potential. So this is what I'm talking about. This is my contact information. And I just feel that using ChatGPT in language learning and teaching is a fascinating topic. I spent a lot of time and invested a lot of research efforts in this topic. And I really enjoy discussing this topic with colleagues in the field. So this is my presentation for today. I want to thank Dr. Zhang for organizing this event, for inviting me. I want to thank all the audience for listening to my talk, and I will welcome comments and feedback. Thank you, everyone.